Welcome to Mindfulness Unscripted. I'm Jon Orsini. Take a big breath in. Here we go. I loved the podcast that we did so much, and you're so good at it. You're just great at it. Like, you helped. I mean, I know, obviously, like, we all as individuals, we know what we know, but depending on who we're talking to and the type of questions that they ask, like, sometimes other people bring out the best of us, or like more of us. And so I don't mean to like overstate it, but in the conversation that we had on your podcast, you asked such great questions, and they were so well directioned. If that makes sense, they were like very directional in a very helpful way that
Yeah.
yeah, it just like helped me articulate the things that I know and that I impart in my classes and things that but it helped bring it out in such a clear way that I just loved our conversation so much. And I just feel like all my best like highlights thus far in my life are in that podcast with you. So I just wanted to,
Oh, yay.
yeah. And in whatever way, kind of, I'm not nearly as good at it as you are, but essentially, like,
No, please.
yeah, no, but in essence, kind of like flip the lens back around, because that whole conversation, of course, was directed at breath and the work that I do. So I just wanted to flip it back around and highlight the work that you do, and all the magic that you're creating on in your side of the world. So
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited. Actually, it is nice to be on the other side of the microphone.
Yeah. So tell me about what brought you to creating the podcast from the wellness work that you do, like the bridge, the parallel, like the work that you do in wellness, and how it brought you to your podcasting.
My background is in communications. I studied communications in college. I got into that career like after college. I've always been in corporate communications. So then when I started my own business, it wasn't an immediate like, oh, I'm going to do podcasting. It sort of evolved from selfishly. I figured like as I'm interviewing people, I'm learning myself.
Mhm.
And that was really that little like the drive that forced me into like, let's do podcasting. And so, I think when I pick guests that they're topics that I'm interested in, they're people that I want to learn from. And I'm hoping that along the way, the listener is also just getting some nugget that they can walk away with, or maybe something resonates and, they're interested in exploring it further. And that was really what started it for me.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. And it makes me think of a few things. One is, of course, Rick Rubin, the music producer. He
Mhm.
very famously came out with that book, The Creative Act. And but
Yes.
he often talks about, I first, of course, was so interested in him years ago as an actor, because you're creating art essentially, and it's hard when you're trying to create something with the audience in mind. It's an interesting catch 22, because you want to, in whatever the format, I think, create something that's supportive to the listener, the viewer, without a doubt. Like, that's the end goal. You want people to benefit from what we're putting out there, right? On the same end, sometimes, or I think, and kind of Rick Rubin's point would be, the best way to do that is to make things and engage with creativity that engages you as the individual. And it can be hard to lose sight of that when you might be so audience focused, but the idea that you want to bring people on that get you lit up, that make you interested, that is the best way to then affect the people listening. And I try to remember that, because I always try to think outwardly to support others, but ironically, sometimes the best way to support others is to really light ourselves up.
Yeah.
I find that to be an interesting thing. It becomes like this backwards approach, which, I don't know. I guess the last thing I'll say about it is that it may seem selfish to become so like what's lighting me up versus what's going to light my audience up. But it's, what it is. I say this quote a lot. It's Marianne Williamson. As we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same.
Yeah, and I think it's also as as an entrepreneur or as a person that's like in healing, I think oftentimes we do focus on the other person, right? We're focusing on other people's well-being. And so there is a little bit of this catch of like, well, is it for them or is it for me, right? And selfish has like a negative connotation, but I think I've come to accept over the years that it doesn't or it shouldn't. I've also come to accept the fact that I am not for some people. And so if they're not interested in the topics that I'm talking about, then they're not going to follow me and they'll unsubscribe. And that can be a really hard pill to swallow sometimes, especially when you're a small business and you're just starting out and you're like, I want everyone to follow me. I want everyone to like me. And so then you have to just, go with it and be like, it's okay. You'll find your followers in different areas, and hopefully what you talk about is the thing that draws them in.
For sure. And then the other piece that it made me think of is I thought about there's this philosopher Krishnamurti that I love
Mm.
so much. And just the long and short of it is there are so many philosophers that have written books or essays or articles or have spoken about different topics. And at the core, in many cases, those topics are the exact same topic, right? But depending on how the individual processes themselves and how the word, just the actual language that they use, I'll
Yeah.
hear two people say essentially the same thing, but one of them just lights the fire inside me and gets me so just life affirming, like so lit up. And the other person, I'm like, that makes logical sense and it sounds good. And I know other people love that, which is awesome because I respect it, but it just doesn't get me lit up. And it's just all about, I don't know, the soul, the essence of the individual. Like, who's to even say? But that's all a way of saying too, like with podcasting, so many people will be like, oh, well, there's so many podcasts out there. Like for me, I hesitated for so long to start one until I eventually just had to because I was too interested to talk to people like yourself. Like I was just too interested. I couldn't not do it. You know what I mean? And I was just
Right.
like, whatever. I know that there's a lot of content, there's a lot of, but the point is when you connect to a voice, when you connect to a soul, a spirit, an essence that lights you up, like that's your person, that's your realm, and and then I keep saying the last thing, but the one other thing before we get into the next bit is there's this body worker, his name's Tim that I work with, and he's in Connecticut, and he's this great body worker. He's an incredible guy, and even though I think he's a couple years younger than me, he not like that matters, but he feels like a mentor in a lot of ways, and
Oh, yeah.
he's just great. He's great at the work he does. He's a great human being. And he said something to me the other day. I was in a bodywork session with him, and he said something the other day, and he said basically that the more depth, and again, this sounds obvious in retrospect, but really the highlight of it, the more depth we go into in our own practice, the more
Mm.
deeply we can take others, our clients, the people that we work with. And I've heard that a million times probably, and I've thought about it in a million ways, but somehow the moment that he said it and how he said it, it just tying to that idea of quote unquote selfishness or being focusing on ourselves to then come outwards and just seeing who it connects with rather than being like, what does this person need? What does that person want? What is this, right? Whether it's an audience or whatever it may be, the idea that it starts at home and the more deeply we go for ourselves and with ourselves, the more deeply we can take others that align or that resonate with the journey that we're on.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. And I think that is so true. Yeah, I think once you're doing, it's like the work never really ends, right? I mean, the depth of the work and the amount that you can do, I mean, it truly is a lifelong journey. And so I hadn't thought about that exactly like what you said. I feel like subconsciously I knew it, like there was something in me that was like, of course that makes sense, but like also hearing you say it, you're like, oh yeah, it almost like encourages you to want to do more work on yourself.
Yeah.
Because especially for me, it's like I want to take my clients as deep as they want to go, right? And I always say, like, when you come in for a session, like, and I do Reiki, right? But if you come in for a session, it's it's going to take you wherever you're ready to go. If
Mhm.
you want to come in for just relaxation, great. That's what you're going to walk out with. But if you're looking to really dig in and like uncover, you know, trauma or other thing that you're kind of working through or holding on to, we can go there. But it is going to take time and commitment and like just knowing that, it's work. It's
Yeah.
not like a quick in and out type of session.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this other saying people meet you at the depth they've met themselves,
Mm.
which I always found interesting. And it's that willingness to say, what's behind that door? Or like, oh, that feels like there's some darkness over there. The difference between when we shut off to that, or maybe it's even unconscious versus saying, okay, you know what? I've got a flashlight. Let me go shine it in that corner and just see what that is. Right. The choice to go deeper. So So
Yeah.
so would you say that Reiki is your primary modality?
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I think, I I do astrology as well, but it's funny because this year in particular, and I can totally go into like the 2026 year and all that, but this year in particular, I've definitely had this feeling of going more into that and maybe like leaving astrology behind. Not that I still love it for myself and I kind of use it like personally, but I'm a little bit on the fence of like, do I like maybe I just don't offer it to clients anymore and I just go all in on like the energy healing and events and all these other things that I'm doing. So yeah, I'm sort of there, but I think this year has a little bit of a different energy. I think
Yeah.
collectively, but also for me personally.
I would love to get into that. And, I'm sure anybody who does sort of anything where they're following like what ignites us, uh, there's a lot of things to pull from. And
Yeah.
something I realized even after doing yoga teacher training at Kripalu, mindful outdoor training at Kripalu, like I've done a lot of different trainings, but to me, it always came back to breath. And what
Oh
I
yeah.
realized, and again, we're all a verb. Like we're all in motion. We're all like growing, transforming all the time. So, but something that I realized was, for me, everything comes back to the breath, which even goes back to my actor training. Like like everything comes back to the breath for me. So what I realized is all these other things are super crucial to my own practice and to support the practice that I share with clients. Like I'll use certain yoga postures to go deeper, but it's about the breath. I'll draw on certain things from nature connection, but bring it back to the breath. And so it's like it becomes this like branch out sort of thing, but the center circle is breath, right? So
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Which doesn't mean it's right or wrong, good or bad. Like some people do multiple modalities, and that's awesome too. It's just finding what really resonates. But I don't think there's anything wrong with just going, you know what? I'm going tunnel vision on this thing and letting everything else support it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think that's probably where I'm going to end up because I think there's that astrology can be such a valuable tool in helping people sort of understand themselves better at the core. At least for me, that's sort of how it started. It really like ignited that self-discovery journey for me where I was really I don't know. I had always been interested in it. Even like when I was a kid, I just knew everyone's signs, and it was like something I just, I don't know. It was fascinating to me. And then when I really got into it and understood like the meaning behind all of the planets and the signs, it all started to make sense. And then you look at your own chart and you're like, oh, okay, my parents always used to say I was very moody as a kid. And like this, it tells me why I was that way. Right. And then you start connecting dots and you're like, okay, I understand who I am. And I
Mm.
don't have to apologize for that because that's just how I was born. And that's what it helped me with. So I think sort of introducing it at certain points along a healing journey could be really helpful. But yeah, that's kind of going along with what you were saying.
That's beautifully said. And I had a conversation somewhat recently with Kaveri. I don't know if you know her. She does Ayurveda at Kripalu and stuff.
Oh,
And
okay.
we talked about astrology a bit, and just the way she articulated it. What you just said about understanding yourself just made me think of that conversation because on both cases, like what some of the stuff that she was saying and what you just said there, it just like rings a bell in my head about how I say this all the time, but how practical it can be. That people think it's, astrology, the star, okay, you know what I mean? And they think it's like out there or just not useful. But when you
Mhm.
frame it in a sense of you bring it, you ground it in the practicality of understanding self and others. And the other thing is she highlighted something for me, the idea that there are these forces in nature, like wind. You can't
Oh, yeah.
you can't see the wind, but you see the effect it has on everything, on the tree branches and the leaf. Like you feel it. You're like, oh, geez, I need a jacket today. But can you imagine if you went outside and said, oh, I don't see any wind, so I don't need a jacket, right? Like that's ridiculous. And the idea that there are these forces and that space is nature. It's an extension of anyway. So
Yeah.
I love that, and the idea that it's just a better way of understanding yourself that it grounds it. It makes it really practical, and yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, it depends on who you end up finding as an astrologer, if that's what you're into. Some people use it for predictive purposes only. Like I talked to a friend the other day and she's like, I'm into this because of the predictive nature. And she found a type of astrology that supports that for her. I'm like, great. For me, that's not what it is, right? That's not how I was taught it. That's not how I view it. I use it from a perspective of I want to understand myself. I want to understand my kids who are constant mysteries to me. So like, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Mm.
But yeah, that's how I use it.
That's beautiful. And so, in regards to 2026, both collectively and individually, because I've been seeing things, is it the year of the horse or something? Like, what's that? I know that that's not astrology. That's like, or is
Yeah.
that Chinese astrology or,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
So,
Chinese astrology.
okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I love horses, so that sounded cool to me. You know, um, so what can you tell me about 2026 or what stands out to you surrounding this year?
So, yeah, I mean, this year from not from the Chinese astrology perspective, but more from a numerology perspective. So, 2026 is year one collectively. And so, from a numerological perspective, there are these 9 year cycles. And so, if we think about 2025, that was year nine of the 9 year cycle. So, 2025 was a year of culminations, of closing, of ending chapters. I don't know if you can think about anything that happened in your life where that was going on, right? Like, for example, I know a lot of people where closing chapters could be death. I mean, some people that I know had like just passed, they passed, right? They passed away in 2025. For me as well, I felt like certain things that I was working on that for a long time had felt just misaligned, but I kept doing it out of a sense of obligation, maybe not wanting to let it go. That was the year where I felt like I literally closed that chapter. I said, no, I had the courage to speak up and say, I'm gonna not do this anymore. And it was hard, but for some reason there was a stronger pull last year. And so this year is really about taking action, about initiating things, not necessarily about having everything perfectly mapped out, but just like starting. It could be planting the seed. It could be like, doing the thing that you've been dreaming about, but maybe you haven't done it. And that's sort of the collective energy that that's being felt is this like year one energy.
Mm, that's beautiful. You know what's funny is I'm just gonna say something on a very personal note. Who knows if I'll keep this in here or not? But I had a career as an actor for a long time. That was my whole adult life was an actor. That's what I did for my career. And then I stepped away from it for a couple years. And then something about I wasn't even thinking of it in terms of, oh, now in the new year I'm gonna do this or I'm gonna do that. I wasn't thinking in those terms. But as we start to approach the holidays, I noticed like I was getting this pit in my stomach. And it was like this feeling, and it felt I was reflecting on a lot, and I was telling my girlfriend Sedona, I was like, I know that this pit in my stomach doesn't feel good because I feel like I'm missing something. I'm missing something, but it's what it's starting to do, and what I'm realizing when I reframe it is that it's creating this burning desire to get back into storytelling. And it's funny because I wasn't thinking of it in terms of, oh, January 1st is the new year. Like I don't, I'm up for that, but I also don't like hang my hat on like, oh, new year, new stuff. Like it's interesting to do some journal reflections. I like to take the time to reflect. Holidays are a good time for that, or can be. And it's just interesting you're saying that this energy was in the air because I don't think I'm just like creating reasoning by looking backwards on it.
Okay.
I really felt an energy of like a motor being like revving inside of me, being like, you're ready, you want this back. You want this back. Because I was willing to let it go. Whatever. That's a long story for another podcast. But I was willing to let my career go because I felt like I needed it so bad in a way that was um I was afraid of who I might be without it, meaning like I just thought I'd be a useless loser if I wasn't a good enough actor. And I was like,
Mm.
I was like, that's not, I need to figure out who I am without this thing so that if for some reason I come back to it fully, that I come back to it from a place of power, not from a place of fear, or as I like to say, a place of love, not a place of fear, right?
Mm.
And so it's just so interesting because then I let it go in essence, and then I started to feel this drive, and it was coming from like love and excitement and being like, how did I not do this for a couple years because I miss this so much. And so it's interesting that it seems to align with the vibe of the numerology of the year itself. That's just, I don't know, that's fascinating to me.
Well, let me add one other thing, and maybe you can reflect on this, which is because we have these 9-year cycles, to see if there are any patterns in what's happening for you this year, you can reflect back on what was going on in other year ones, if that makes sense. So I'll throw out these years for you. 2017 was a year one, 2008, and 1999. So those were like the most recent year ones that you can think about. So take some time, ask
Yeah.
yourself, like, was there anything that you were, maybe it was acting, maybe there was something else that maybe it was like breath work that you were starting up, because there can be patterns that echo this year, right? The
Hmm.
2026 year.
Yeah, well, certainly 2008 was when my whole career really started. Active
Mm.
career. Yeah. But yeah, no, thank you for that. What do you feel like is starting for you this year that feels like that feels like it's really bubbling up?
Yeah. Okay. So this year for me, I've had this like community was like the big word that popped up for me. And I think one of the things that is like starting is using the farm that we live on right now for hosting these community events. So I'm planning a retreat, like a half day retreat in May, which I'm really excited about. But, we've moved into this place. We've had it for 3 years, but last year we moved in like officially. So I closed the chapter in like my previous home that I had been in for actually 9 years. And I moved here, and this place has like such a like different vibe. I love the nature. I love the outside. And I knew that immediately when we moved in here, I'm like, I need to bring people here. I don't know how, I don't know like what, but I want other people to experience like all of this nature so that's really what's bubbling up for me is like not just bringing people to the farm, but also like doing a lot more like group events and community-based events and things like that.
That's beautiful. That sounds amazing. And you're in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. Perfect. It's a good place to be. There's such a great wellness community around Boston specifically, right?
Mhm.
So we met at Kripalu first time, or did
Yeah.
you meet? Yeah, because
Yeah.
the it's cool that what I love about where Kripalu is situated is that people come up from New York City, people come over from Boston. It's kind of like equidistant. And of course, it's near the Hudson Valley and stuff like that. So I love that it's this kind of hub. I went to college in Boston, and so like that
Mhm.
holds a special place in my heart. And then I spent, most of my adult life in New York City. And so both these places, and so it kind of became this like hub where I'm meeting more people like now from the Boston wellness community. There's a great ecstatic dance community that I became really great friends with in
Oh,
Boston. So
really?
yeah, I
Oh,
love.
you have to tell me about it. I totally want to join.
I will. Yeah, we could sidebar because my friend
Yes.
Oliver, he has a farm in Massachusetts that we did some breath work and then dance events typically in the warmer months so we could do a
Yeah.
bonfire and stuff. And so yeah, I'd be more than happy to connect you with that group. It's just really genuinely sweet people. And
Mhm.
I'll just say this about the dance component. I'm not the type of person who's like a dancer that I show up and I'm all comfortable and I know how to
Yes.
dance. Like, I'm not that person. What's so special about when you find the right community, like a dance community in particular, in this case, is that people are so welcoming and
Mhm.
everyone's there because they understand like this isn't about like looking a certain way or whatever. It's about authentically expressing yourself through movement. And you
Mhm.
just go with the beat and let it take you and it's more like kids playing. It's not about how you look or like showing up to whatever. It's about how you coming from the inside and saying, how do I feel like I want to express myself through movement in this moment, given the music, given the environment, and all these things. So nobody's there. It's the least judgmental environment I've probably ever been in. It's the most loving and supportive environment. And so it just sounds awesome that you're getting this going and the place where you're at now because. Um, Getting communities like that together and like what could we possibly need more of in the world right now you know like
Yeah.
non-simple spaces. So do you tend to do more work with women and women's groups? Do you do like a more broad population or how do you kind of like how does your work seem to land?
I think it does land more with women. I mean, I've definitely had men clients come to see me, but it definitely lands more with women.
Mm,
Yeah.
beautiful. And so obviously, so we're talking about Reiki primarily. Reiki is the modality. Would you say like drew you to Reiki or got you kind of like with that being the directional thing for you?
I mean, yeah, I've gotten asked that before, and I always say that I needed Reiki myself, and that's how I got into it. And it was like it really showed up at a time where I didn't, I was going through a really rough time in my life, and I had a friend who had done Reiki, or she had taken some Reiki classes, and she asked me, she's like, "Oh, do you want me to do Reiki on you?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." I think I was so desperate. I wasn't really sure what. I was sort of like anything that will make me feel better. And at that time, I was just holding a lot in, but that was my MO. I mean, that's what I've always done. And I think in that year, I also had started talk therapy as well. So it was like a first for lots of things. And when she did Reiki, it just released. I had all these emotions bubbling up. I was crying. It was like all of these things were coming up that I wasn't expecting. I just felt like I was very strong. I was holding it all together, and it like completely melted me and like broke me apart. And all these things had to come out. Right. And so there is like such a nice sense of relief. And so that was like my first experience with Reiki. And then I sort of forgot about it for like years because, life happens and you do all these other things. I never thought of it as like something I could do for a profession. And then I revisited it probably around COVID or before that, like the year before, where again, I had just had my kids, we were in COVID. There were all these other things that were bubbling up for me that maybe I hadn't fully processed. And again, I kind of sought it out as like another method to kind of help me along my journey. And at some point, that really was like the seed that got planted. Like, maybe you could do this for a living. Maybe you can end up helping people. And, I sort of like from there, it just kind of kept going. It kept growing. My curiosity kept growing. I started dabbling into all these different fields more for myself. It always started with me first. And then afterwards, um, it sort of became something that I ended up doing for others.
Mm. Are you so just to kind of bullet point it, Reiki, obviously it's focused on energy, right?
Mhm.
Um, do you want to give like a few bullet points about what it represents? Because again, I'm sure there's like
Yeah.
different aspects, just kind of like astrology, depending on how people hear it framed.
Yeah.
They have different points of view on even what it is, even though we all kind of like know what astrology is. It's when you frame it differently, it's got different ways that it kind of like hooks or makes sense. And so I'd just be curious about your perspective on Reiki, how you utilize it, how it's helped you.
Yeah, so I always like to say, so Reiki, like in a nutshell, it comes from Japan. It's a subtle energy technique, and it is based on the principle that everything is made up of energy. So, and we hear this in science as well, right? There's energy in inanimate objects, but there's also energy within you and me as human beings, as living things. And so that sort of energy, right? And kind of what this principle it's based on. Then I like to think of Reiki or energy as like a river flowing through us. That's really how I imagine it. And you want this river to be free from obstructions. You want it to be like this beautiful crystal stream. It's got this like lovely sound to it, right? You can just like sit right by it and just like be there the whole day. Now, of course, over time, or if we have certain experiences in our life that can bring certain obstructions or certain blocks into this river, into this stream. And that's where Reiki comes in, right? It comes to unblock those areas. It comes to open them up. It comes to perhaps close off an area. Sometimes there's an overflow, right? Again, going back to the river idea, you can have like a beautiful stream of water at the same time, there could be an area where the water is just gushing and you just need it to stop, right? And so Reiki can also come in and maybe close things off if you need it.
Mm,
Um, and so energy feels different also on different people. And that's, as a Reiki master, I really, when I work with clients, because people will ask me like, what do you feel during a session, right? I mean, for me, it's always different depending on who I'm working with, depending on what they have going on. It can feel like heat, it can feel like tingling, but those are all like little signs or signals to me that, okay, this is an area to work on. This is an area to focus on,
Mm.
in terms of either balancing it or clearing it or opening it or kind of closing it off a little bit.
That's really fascinating. It makes me think of a few things. One about chakras, the other about breath work that I was going to say. But before I do, it's I have seen and experienced some of it, but just to be so, do you use hands-on techniques, or it's all like kind of like a hovering sort of? Can you tell me a little more about that, like how your approach to that?
Yeah, my approach is hands off. For me personally, I found that it works best and mostly because I can then feel a lot more the
Mm,
energy.
interesting.
I've
Yeah.
definitely gone to practitioners that do hands on, and that's totally fine as well. But for me, I just found that that worked for me.
Yeah, that's so fascinating because um again, it kind of brings me back to that idea of the wind, for instance. Like
Mhm.
you don't see it, but you see the effect it has on everything. And the idea of energy and how some people might hear that energy and be like, what is that even? Right? But we all know, for instance, sometimes I've said it like this. We all know when we're either in a room with somebody or like we're in a situation where we're like, ugh, like we just don't
Yes.
feel right. For instance, everybody knows what that is. Or it's just like, oh, that person like gives me the creeps, or that person just like lights me up, like on whatever end of the spectrum. And so the idea that energy wouldn't be something palpable is kind of ridiculous because like we all know what energy feels like in different circumstances and situations. And something that I think is so awesome about Reiki is I've been reading this woman's, is it Judith, like Dr. Judith. Anyway, it's a person who wrote it's like the thickest book on chakras maybe that's ever been written, and it's so comprehensive. It's an incredible book. I would have to pull up her name. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes or something because it's an incredible book. But she'll talk about how certain chakras can become blocked, which of course, like you're saying, life events, different traumas or different things, family, cultural conditioning, all these things. I talk about these often in the context of breath work, like I said, too, that is going to bullet point. But the idea that energy can get blocked, but it also how it could, like you're saying, it could overflow as well. Right. So speaking of these energy centers, how they can be blocked, but that they could also be overactive.
Yes.
And so what do you find in terms of like say for instance if there's any particular whether think of it in terms of chakras, energy centers, or what, like are there any particular things that stand out to you, for instance, that you've seen with certain clients or even with yourself where you're like, oh, this is what it feels like when a certain chakra or certain energy feels blocked, this is what it feels like when a certain chakra or energy feels overactive, like you mentioned the river like overflowing, are there yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from experience, and again, I think a lot of it has comes down to like your intuition and what you're like feeling in that moment. And it's interesting because when I'll bring it up to a client and I'll ask them, they'll like confirm it for me, like, oh yeah, that's totally true. But oftentimes when I feel what is it? Coolness. That to me indicates that it's overactive. And a lot of times I've found that like in the head space, like your crown, right? It's like this person overthinks everything. They're probably like constantly in their head, like they're always have thoughts going. And that's been confirmed by a client. Or, for example, in the solar plexus, where they're just constantly like over giving, they're constantly doing, there's like so much action, they can't even stop themselves, right? And I remember I had brought that up with a client who I think she worked at like as like an executive assistant or something. And she was like, "Oh yeah," she's like, "I'm always like doing for others. I rarely do for myself." And that was again, I felt like this cooling sensation um with at least with a few clients. That's kind of what comes up.
That's really fascinating. And I like how you mentioned too, for instance, the solar plexus, like the overdoing or the overgiving, how, you know, there I've heard it said that the chakras, the energy centers of the chakras make a spiraling, like they
Mhm.
spiral. And I just want to speak to this because again, if anybody would be listening to this, it's like, what the hell is this BS that like talking about energy or this or that? So first of all, what I find fascinating about the chakras is that they represent certain things. Like you're mentioning the solar plexus, just below the heart there, like this action oriented or this force of will. I've heard it said like different ways, right? That's articulated. So whether you take it as a literal energy center or as just a behavioral component of what you do or don't do in your life or what may or may not be working, it's still relevant. And the other point I want to make is I have this beloved client, and he's in Massachusetts, and long story short, was in a session, knew nothing about chakras. I'm pretty sure he didn't even know the word chakra, and he's open to whatever, and he was, you know, healing, and he wanted to come to a breathwork session, and he does such beautiful, we do beautiful work together, right? After this one particular group session we were sharing at the end, and he was, you know, I notice what goes on with people. I don't always speak to it, of course, not just for privacy reasons, but I'm not necessarily going to bring something up unless it comes up or the person asks something or whatever. Anyways, he was holding his hand essentially over his solar plexus,
Mm.
and he was holding his hand. And he was talking about, he's like, I had just this crazy feeling. He's like, I just felt this like spiraling, and all the while he's like his hand is in this circular motion right above his solar plexus. And I know him well, and he does not know, like, again, chakra, like whatever. He doesn't know anything about that. He
Right.
was describing a swirl, a swirling sensation, a spiraling feeling in his solar plexus, which, all I'm gonna say, that could be just a ridiculously convenient coincidence, but
Yeah.
it also can go to show you, all right, this is someone who does not have like a planted seed about what these things are or not, and it goes to show you that these things are really happening in the body. Also, they're ancient, thousands of years. You know, people have been drawing on these concepts for a long time. Like there's something very tangible and very pragmatic to this. And so I always like to point that out.
Well, even to that, so every month I do like a chakra energy clearing at like a salt cave here in Acton. And multiple times I've had clients say to me like that come to this event that they'll see a particular color. And what's interesting is like that color was the color of like, for example, they'll say, "Oh, I saw like greens and blues," and and at the same time, I'm working on their heart chakra and their throat chakra, right? And so they're, again, they don't know anything about the chakras, but yet they've seen those colors in their like in their mind's eye. So yeah.
That's beautiful. And I just love that because, not to kind of over drill the point, but to me, you know, even in thinking of terms of this podcast and all the different conversations I might have, I was like, you know, one thing that absolutely matters to me is to ground these different practices in
Yeah.
pure pragmatism. Because very often, and there was something you said earlier too that I think is so poignant, that you came to the work because you were struggling with something or having an experience in your life, and your friend came to you and was like, "Well, you want to try Reiki?" And like, I'm not trying. This is not me putting words in your mouth, but I'm gonna paraphrase for myself. It's like, "F it, I'll try anything." Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you just get to a point where you're just like, "I do not feel good. You're telling me this might do something. Sure, I'll try it. Sure, I'll try it." And sometimes that's the place that we have to get to be open to trying something where we're just like, you know what, you know, I can't keep running into the same wall. Sure, breath work, like what the hell is that? Or like Reiki energy, what is that? Right? But you'll come to it, and then, and again, depending on how a person languages it and frames it, and depending on how they speak about it, and depending on how you've gone into the practice yourself, people have these completely paradigm shifting experiences, and have these, like you're saying, I just think it's so cool that you see that someone would see colors correlating with a chakra, not even knowing that that's what that is. And then to, in retrospect, see like, wow, yeah, green represents my heart, and I saw green. Oh my God, when you're working on the heart chakra, I just think, I don't know, that gets me really lit up. Like it gets me really excited because it's just the pure pragmatism of these ancient practices.
Yeah, because they're, and I think that the powerful thing about it too, and probably with breath work as well, we get people to a place where they are so relaxed,
Mm.
right? I mean, before you even start a session, you're already starting to unwind them. You're starting to bring their nervous system back into this really sort of neutral or balanced state. And so from there, they can then start to feel and see and sense all of these other things that if they were driving in their car or like on a work call, they wouldn't be sensing those because why? I mean, they're focused on all these other things, right? They're stressed, they're having thoughts in their head, right? Like we talked about the tiger in the room, right? On our last in our last podcast together, right? And so when you get to that place of your nervous system is now relaxed, you're
Mhm.
in rest and digest. Yeah, you are going to be sensing more of those things. And for someone that maybe hasn't experienced that before, it feels weird because people have said that to me. They're like, it was the craziest thing. I've like never had that happen to me before, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
because oftentimes they're not in that place,
You're right.
right?
Yeah, there's this quote that I had learned from the mindful outdoor training at Kripalu that we used often, and it was, "The world is full of magical things patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper." And so it makes me think of that because, like you're saying, when we're in the hectic midst of day to day and we're just operating at a certain level of consciousness, just like answering emails, tending to this, putting out that fire, doing this, doing that, there are so many other layers of things going on. The subtle energy, like in the energy body, the emotional body, there are so many layers of things going on, whether inside or outside of us, that are there the moment we can attune to them, the moment our awareness can come to them. And just like you so beautifully said too, the idea that when we create a space where someone's nervous system can just kind of downshift a little bit, or somehow bring the attention to places that normally don't get attention, that how just this flood of either information or revelation or healing, what can come through by that shift, you know.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
beautiful. The other thing I was going to say too around breath work was you said so well the idea that speaking to that river analogy, that there could be these obstructions. And the whole time you're talking about that, I'm like, yes, yes, because I talk about the breath sometimes metaphorically, that the breath, as you've heard me say in sessions and different things when we've talked, the breath can sweep through like a broom, find these obstructions, and start to shift, rearrange, or catalyze,
Mm.
metabolize that energy. And it's and this is what happens. I have like several different points that I want to tie together here, because the other thing is related to that, right? So you're talking about moving, like clearing the channel for the river with Reiki, with this process of Reiki, and with the breath, we're clearing the channel for the river through the process of the breath. And going back all the way back to saying how there's Reiki, there's astrology, these different modalities, and like what it
Mm.
feels like to really zero in on one thing. Um, I did Aikido, which is this Japanese martial art. I did Aikido in New York City years ago for a period of time, and I love the sensei there, and I just love that dojo. It was in Brooklyn, and there was this quote on the door, and it was from some ancient text. I feel silly that I don't remember exactly what it was, but the quote was something along the lines of, "When we penetrate one thing deeply enough, we reveal the entire universe."
Mm.
Right? So this idea that when we really, really go into the depths on something, that, it's like, it's that similar to that thing. There are a bunch of different ways to climb to up the mountain, right? There's all kinds of
Right.
different pathways, but they're all heading to the summit, to the top of the mountain. And so when I hear people who are very deep in the practices, like you are with Reiki, say things that resonate so strongly across modalities, it's like, yes, these are always up the mountain, and it's just so beautiful, and they all support each other. Like I do breath work and sound. It
Mm.
come, like when these modalities combine together, and that they all have these beautiful ways of getting to these core, like a core essence of healing, of growth, of transformation. And so I just wanted to say that, to like tie all those pieces together, because you just, yeah, again, you articulated that so beautifully about the river analogy.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about the supporting. Yeah, I think all these modalities do support each other. And it's funny because, and again, not to like say anything negative about practitioners that have a ton of different offer a ton of different services, offer so many different modalities. That's great. And I love that, right? You can go there, you can sort of pick and choose. And I think when I started off, I wanted to do something similar. And I think one of the biggest reasons was because I wasn't really sure, one, perhaps like what would draw the most clients, right? And I think this is what we talked about earlier too, right? Like you're so focused on like how much can I help someone else? I want to offer 10 things on the menu so they can pick and choose, and I will be there to support them. And then you realize, and it makes me think of like when you go to like a buffet or when you go to a restaurant and the menu is like 10 pages long. I personally, I'm overwhelmed, right?
Mhm.
Like, and I think of the Cheesecake Factory because like the times I've been there, the menu is so immense. I'm like, I don't even know what I want to order. Like, I know I'm hungry and I want something delicious. But that's the thing, right? It's like, do you want a menu that is like 10 pages long and then people can't really decide? Or do you want a menu that's like, it's, one page and the options are limited, but this is what it's like, you're going to get the best of the best. And
Yeah.
yes, I might bring in a tuning fork, I might bring in some sound bowls, but it's not the primary modality. And I think at the longer I've been in my business, the longer I've sort of grown as like a practitioner, as like an entrepreneur, I've started to feel much more comfortable with only offering a few things versus like the whole spectrum, which I can easily do, right? Or I could easily kept getting certified because that's the other danger that
Mhm.
happens with a lot of people I know, right? They just keep getting certified because you just don't ever feel like it's enough.
That's a huge one. That's a huge one. Because with these different modalities too, it's like where does it, you have a scope of practice, right?
Mhm.
And where does it dip into not being a therapist, right? For instance, because sometimes, like I mean, I've friends. One of my best friends I grew up with, he was a personal trainer for a long time, and he would say like sometimes it's like his clients, it almost feels like therapy, and he's like, I don't give them advice or anything, but I listen, obviously. And that's the thing. So it's just like even being a good friend sometimes can feel like quote unquote therapy. And obviously you don't go outside, we don't go outside our scope of practice, but speaking to your point, that idea that like, oh, if I just get this one other certification, I'll be more qualified to do this or more qualified to do that. And I am very grateful to have currently, I think it's 5 doctorate level psychology clients of mine that are doctorate level psychologists. And so between them, between a therapist I personally had worked with for the past couple years, and a couple of close friends that are therapists, I would constantly be like, I think I want to do this, and that, and they're like, John, what are you talking about? Where does it end? Like, do the work that you do, like hold loving space, and you stay in your scope of practice, and it's just sort of because you can get caught in that trap, like, oh, just this one more, anyways, that's a whole long thing, so I don't mean to go down a rabbit hole
It
with that,
is.
but it
It is.
hits.
It's a whole nother thing. But it just made me think of like what you were talking about. So I brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah, even the my personal previous therapist, he had said to me, he's like, John, just keep reading and keep growing yourself. He's like, you're already doing it. You're already doing it. And I was like, yeah, but shouldn't I get like a PhD and blah blah blah? He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, if you're gonna open up a private therapy practice,
Yeah.
then yes. He's like, but if you are going to be, this somatic coach support, this breathwork guide, he's like, you already have multiple certifications in that. He's like, what are you talking about? So, similarly speaking, but the idea that you could keep going with that, and it's almost like, again, not to tie too many things together, but the idea of with podcasting, right, to get the word out, and then there's the editing. It's like we could spend so much time doing things that don't directly like get to the undercurrent of what we're trying to support others with. There are all these like ancillary, if that's the word, ancillary things, that maybe it's time to outsource or let, like other people whose specialty, like people who love editing stuff, right? Like people who love editing, and then let that be the support so you can focus on Reiki. You could focus on the thing that you specialize in and just let everything else support that.
I think that's a bit of like the entrepreneur journey is that there's this I don't know if there's this belief that you have to do it all yourself. And I mean, it comes out of so many different things. Number one is like, you're probably not making a lot when you're first starting, right? You don't have as many clients, right? You're worrying about your budget, right? There are all these things. And so much of it is like, well, I'm taking it on, I'm doing it. Or maybe there's the other sort of story you tell yourself of like, but they won't know how to do it either, right? It's so hard. It can be hard to delegate when you know what you want, the brand, the vision, et cetera, right? So there's a lot of these different things. And I've been reading lots of different books on like, business and all these things. And one of them, and I can't remember the name of the book, but one that really stuck was the fact that you have to, in order to be successful, you have to have other people on your team. Like it's just does not work with one person. Even if you are an entrepreneur, like you have to make choices, even if they're like small things where you're going to like offload something that is just draining your energy. And so I've done that with like some of the design work. It's like, yeah, I could spend 5 hours creating a Canva, PDF, or I could like get someone to do it for me in an hour and at a minimal cost. Same thing with the podcasting. I've reached that point now where I'm like, yeah, I'm not making anything out of off of my podcast, but I think I'm making my time is so valuable that I'm investing in that.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. This almost started to feel, as you were talking that through, I'm like, oh, I'm starting to feel like I'm in a therapy session right now because I feel like I have to do everything, not because I know better than anybody. I know for a fact there are most things I don't know better than other people, right? And so it's not that. It's just like not being sure if other people like will it's a trust issue that I have with outsourcing to other people. And it's not that I don't think they would do a good job. They would probably do a better job than me. I just don't know how to let go of the reins for some reason. That's why I felt like therapy is I'm like, what is the undercurrent belief that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know
yeah.
how to let go of the reins, for I guess it's because it's something that like represents you. So it's like no matter what it is, I know that I was responsible for it. Whereas if something represents you, but somebody else is responsible for it, like that's an interesting feeling. So it's like a trust thing, I think. Um, but anyway, so that resonated really strongly when you said that. And one of the many reasons why I was so enjoy talking to you so much is because there's the work itself, like for instance with the Reiki, and then there's all the work that surrounds it that you're speaking to. And all of it comes back to I was struggling in my own life. I found this modality that shifted the earth I was walking on, not to use a platitude or a cliche, but my life, like in my case, there's my life before breath work, specifically, especially specifically. I mean, I use the calming pranayama yoga breathing every day. Like that is my foundational practice. So to say that that didn't shift the ground I walked on, that's not exactly accurate. But to say that when I experienced what I got as somatic breath work, there's my life before that and there's my life after that, right? Like it was paradigm shifting. And it sounds like with Reiki with you, right? It's paradigm shifting. So the thing about being an entrepreneur, especially when it's coming from this place of I don't have to be for everybody, going back to your earlier point. But the people that resonate with this work, I want them to know that they are not alone. They don't have to keep struggling the way that they have been. And it's not like at least I'll just speak to myself. Like, I certainly don't know that I have the answers, that I'm not the whatever, but I do have this modality that I have spent a significant portion of my life working on with myself so that I can also share it with others. And it's just like you just want the world to know that this modality exists, that these opportunities, this hope, there is that this hope exists, and you just want people to know that, right? So if you're just like sitting in a closet by yourself like yelling it into a pillow, it's just like, okay, like, so you need, we want to get the word out there. So it's like what, like in terms of just tying that together, like how to be an effective entrepreneur in the space you're in, all these things matter. And it's not about selling, it's about resonance with a modality
Yeah.
that changed your life.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
so to that end, just a couple more things I'd be curious to ask. With Reiki, I often think of it in terms of a one-on-one session because that's how I've received Reiki before. But do you do group sessions with Reiki, or how does that work, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I was talking earlier about like the once a month chakra clearing that I do. So that's a group session. There's probably about 12 people that we can fit into the salt cave.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean it's lovely. I think it's a great entry point. I would say also maybe talking to the point that you were just mentioning, right? For people that are probably thinking like, "Oh, I don't know, maybe that's too woo-woo," or I don't know how this is really going to work. I would say with any modality, not just Reiki, right? If there's ever a curiosity, group sessions are the best way to experience it, right? Because it's like low entry point, like it's not one-on-one. You're going to get a taste for it. You're also get a taste for the practitioner, because that is so key as well, right? If it could be an expert, right, who's been doing it for 50 years, but you just don't vibe with that person, it's just not going to work for you. So it's so important for you to also feel out the practitioner. Like, do you like their energy? Do you like how they talk, right? Whatever it is. And I think, so yeah, sort of, I digressed a little bit, but I do those once a month, and that's a group session. And I also offer like couples sessions. So you can have like Reiki with me, like it's two people.
Mm.
And that works well. I mean, the way I typically do it is I'll spend like a good amount of time on each person individually, but then I'll also kind of give them like, I'll do Reiki for both of them as well at the same time, like group Reiki. And
Mhm.
so that works as well.
That's beautiful. I'd love to if combining the breathwork groups with Reiki.
Mhm.
We should sidebar talk about that because
Yeah.
because again this idea of clearing channels and helping and also on the other end helping that you said so well relax the overflow if there's areas of overflow with people too. It's not just one. It's about balance, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And that's so well said too about the group context. It's like that you can feel it out. You could feel out the facilitator and alignment around all that. And that's beautiful. And are there other things that you are working on that you'd like to share while we're here? I mean, you mentioned you'll be starting in May, this retreat at your space in May.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm super excited for that, and we'll
Mhm.
see how it goes. Hopefully there'll be more. But yeah, this first one, I mean, it's we have like a lot of different things planned, but we have like a really nice trail in the back. So there'll be some forest bathing. There'll definitely be some Reiki and meditation with it. And we're doing yoga. There's going to be a yoga flow class there. We're going to do some cacao and a fire ceremony. So a lot of different things mixed in, but I think it makes for a really nice, well-rounded, like half day retreat.
Mhm.
So that's sort of one of the big things. I have a couple of, I do lots of, like I said, every month I'm doing at least one or two different group events at some local wellness centers near me. The biggest one that I like work at is the Salt Cave in Acton. It's called Salted Soul, and that's a great one. And then I always have like, classes that I'm doing or things like that.
Beautiful. And I love this too. Sometimes there's this sense that people need to do this mega trip to Peru or Costa Rica or Bali,
Oh,
and like all that's amazing. I mean, I haven't personally done that. Like pretty much all my work has been local. I mean, I've been to Texas and Los Angeles, but um, the idea that this work can be done on a half day retreat, and it's more that it's just like a lifestyle that you could pepper in locally, and just by being part of these communities, it could become part of your life. And to me, I mean, it's amazing if you go and you have some like life-changing experience in Peru or something. That sounds freaking incredible. Like, sure, I'd love to do that too. I just wasn't able to find the time off personally so far. But I would love to create a space for that. But the idea that you don't have to like leave your life for 10 days to do a reclusive retreat. You have opportunities like you're saying that you're creating, and it could be local. You could kind of just do have to again in these communities. And I never underestimate the way that we even met at a breathwork session, and just like heart by heart your community builds. And it's just, if there's one thing that comes down to happiness and health, it's community more than exercise, more than diet, although those are important. Community is everything. And you come to these non-judgmental welcoming spaces where, like you said, forest bathing, yoga, and it's all just like, hey, come, just come as you are kind of feeling, right? Like meeting people where they're at in these great modalities. And so anyways, I just think it's so awesome that you're doing that, building a community around that.
Yeah, I think there's two things there. I think one is like more and more, I myself included, people want to get out into nature, right? I mean, I spend most of my day indoors, right? Unless I'm walking my dog or I'm going out for a little walk, right? But I spend most of my day in front of my computer. And then the other thing is it's nice to do it with someone else, even if you don't know them, just to know that it's one, you don't have to think about like the flow and exactly what you're doing, but you're sort of going to be guided and led the whole entire time. And it'll be just a nice experience overall. And like, I think more and more people are looking for that.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, that's what I'm hoping I can bring to others, right?
Absolutely. There was this pretty legendary yoga teacher at Kripalu, and she said back in the ashram days when Kripalu was an ashram, that they would say group power is stronger than willpower.
Mm.
Just by showing up in community, like you end up having experiences that wouldn't necessarily, I mean, work on your own is obviously beautiful and important. Obviously, we both know that, but doing it in community has this whole other layer. And then also too, I like how you mentioned, because I think of this when I would guide the meditative hikes at Kripalu, that we would do these sit spot meditations, right? Where you kind of you hike for a while in silence and then you just sit in your own, everybody finds their own area where they feel called to sit, like leaning on a tree or where by the stream, whatever. And that by being in a group, I would recognize if I was by myself on a hike, that's incredible. And I do that all the time. Go with my dog, go with my girl, like I do that all the time. But like when you're with a group, it's just like, okay, we're going to sit here for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever. And that's just what the group is doing. So a part of your brain can just kind of turn off and stop having to be hyper vigilant. Like, oh, is 5 minutes enough? Or should I do 12 minutes? Or should I go now? Or should I sit longer? Right? Like that part of your, there's less decisions in a good way because the flow's laid out, just like you said. And I think that's such a powerful aspect of doing these things in community and the guiding and everything.
And when you do things on your own, it's easier for you to move on because I mean, I do this too, where you can hold yourself less accountable when it's just you. You're like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'll do that tomorrow or I'll do it later today. And then later just never happens. But when you are with other people, they're holding you accountable kind of silently, like not
Yeah.
really, but just because you're there,
Yeah.
everyone's doing it. So you're also a part of it. Yeah.
Beautifully said. And then last thing to that I'll say is that, and then there's the flip side of that, which sometimes I personally push too hard, right? Like I'll when I'm by myself, like rather
Yeah.
than just being held in a container and like being in the experience of what that container is offering in the community, sometimes I'll be like, well, okay, so in the container, maybe we'd sit in nature for 10 minutes or something and just observe the breeze and the leaves, right? And that's the thing. If I'm by myself, I'll be like 10 minutes. Is that even in like what's 10 minutes? It should be more. Like first of all, what you just said, right? Absolutely. I have that all the time where it's like, oh, maybe, whatever, maybe that's enough. I'll just do it later. But then on the other end, sometimes if I'm in a mode where I'm being hard on myself, I'll be like, why wouldn't it be an hour? Like if you're really good at this, like make the space to do this for this long or whatever. And the point is the critic comes in, whether it's on the short end or whether it's trying to push for more, the critic comes in and starts chattering all over the place on whatever the end is, my point. And when you're in the group container, it's not to say that the self critic won't show up necessarily, but the idea that it's held in a different way, that part can turn off. There's an invitation for that part to just calm down and take a backseat, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Totally.
so last thing I want to say on mine is just I have so much respect. Two things I want to point out. One, that you're a mom, right? And I have so much respect because such a thing to say would be how, as a person, just even with a job that functions in the world at all, to be like, oh, I don't have time to do this sort of this or that wellness practice. And so, especially as a mom, as a caretaker, like, how the hell do you have time for anything, right? Just realistically, I've seen it. I don't have kids at this point, but I have nephews. I've seen it firsthand with my sister and others. And I'm just like, I actually, yeah, how do you have time for anything? Like right now, you don't even have time to take a shower or like eat the rest of your English muffin because like your kids are all. Um, so how I so much respect for how you find time for the wellness practice because ultimately, the platitude or cliche, but is so true is in order to support others, we need to make sure we fill our cup so that we can then pour over. And so especially as a mom, like how you, I guess I would say in quotes, make time, because it's not like you're going to find extra time, but how you balance, staying true to your wellness practice for yourself, for others, which of course will in turn make you a better, more connected, more grounded mother and caretaker and person with a family, and so I have so much respect for that. And well, sort of anything you'd like to share or any tips or bits you have around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, so I left my corporate job, I guess it was 2 years ago now.
Mhm.
And I think, oh, for a while I was doing my holistic, my energy healing practice plus my corporate job. And that just became completely unmanageable. It's just one, I noticed myself wanting to put more effort into the thing I was passionate about, which was Reiki and energy healing and all of that versus the other thing. But at the same time, it didn't allow time for other things, right? Because I was working in the off hours, like I was doing stuff at night. I was constantly on my computer. I was always like trying to like do more work because I was, finding the balance of like, how do I keep the business going while also making sure that I'm meeting my deadlines like at my corporate job. So at some point like that one of those had to go and I decided that I would leave corporate and I would go all in on this. And I think that decision, while it helped in so many ways in terms of making more time for my family and having more time that was really managed by me. And I think ultimately freedom was the word that kept popping up. Like the reason I wanted this is because of the freedom that I would have with my time and how I managed it, right? If I wanted to see clients on weekends, I could, but and I actually don't, right? I sort of made the decision like I only see clients during these hours on these specific days. Why? Because I want to be home when the kids get home. I want to make sure my weekends are free. And I remember when I was in corporate, like oftentimes I was working on weekends. I was checking my phone constantly. I was responding to emails at all hours of the day, right? So it built this like really um I don't know if addictive is the right word, but it did build this like a little bit of an addictive behavior of like constantly being on. And I would say like probably the first year and a half of like leaving, I had to retrain myself. And it was the hardest thing to like to figure out this new working style for me. And that was a little bit of my journey of like figuring out what works best for me, what works best for my family, where do I have to set better boundaries because like I want to be able to pick them up and take them to school. And so a lot of that had to do with like being better at boundary setting. And that was not something that I would say I was good at. I'm very much a people pleaser. I've always
Mhm.
been a yes person. Like, oh yeah, you want me to do that? Sure. Go. I'll figure out my schedule, but I'll get it done for you.
Mm.
And now I'm at a point where no, that's not going to happen. Like it's a lot. It is hard. It still is hard to say no,
Mhm.
but I definitely pause a lot more before saying yes than I used to. And
Mm.
I think that's allowed me to be more present with my family.
That's beautiful. Yeah, as I've gotten older, I've realized the brass tacks of when we say yes to something, it means saying no to something else, at least one other something else. And it's I when I look back at my life, like all the things that I didn't even realize I was saying yes to meant all the things I didn't even realize I was saying no to. And in many cases in a good way, right? Like I only, just a bullet point, I only lived in New York City because I was just like tunnel vision on being an actor and being in the theater, and that was that, right? But
Mhm.
it was such a strong yes that I didn't realize I was saying no to everything, like basically everything else in life. But it was such a strong yes that it made it easy that I didn't even think of other things being a no. It was just an obvious no. So I
Right.
find it interesting when you're starting to, as you get older and like more components of life come in, when you're now balancing not just what you're passionate about, but family and friends, community, all these other things that you might be balancing, your own physical well-being, right? And then the yeses and the nos, I think, can maybe start to become more vivid in a certain sense. I can't even imagine as a mom and a caretaker, like how many more layers there are and how much more attuned you have to be to your yeses and your nos, like you're saying, and especially if you're inclined to want to be like a people pleaser, but like just the nice side of that, which is just like I care about other people and I want to be there. If someone asks me something, I want to be able to say yes. Um, so yeah, attuning to your yeses and nos, like what you put your sometimes the way I think about it is what you put your time in is what you're putting your faith in. Um,
Mhm.
I learned that from Rolf Gates, who's a teacher at Capella, like that, or that he would talk about what are you putting your faith in, and then my mind went, what I'm putting my faith in is probably what I'm putting my time in, right? Like they're
Yeah.
interchangeable in a sense. So it's like I'm putting my time into my kids, I'm putting my time into my own wellness, my own well-being, my own mental health, right? By boundaries and stuff. So I just again, just all a long way of saying I have so much respect for you and for people who can balance those things with raising kids and having family and creating the space to show that it is very much possible, right? Very doable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a learning process. I feel like there's never a straight path. There are some days which are a lot harder than other days. And, I think as a parent or maybe as a mom, and I'll speak about myself, is I know I'm a lot harder on myself than I'm sure other people looking in, or even my spouse. Like, he's like, "You're such a great mom," and I'm always hard on myself. I'm like, "Oh, I could have done that better. I wish I wouldn't have done that." And it's like always these looking back and course correcting. And I just realized that that's just a part of it. And I don't know. I feel like throughout this podcast I'm listening, I'm like, I feel like I'm accepting a lot of things, but it really is. It's just a part of the journey. And to be honest, I tell my kids that I mess up a lot. Like I'll like pull them aside and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing half the time. I'm like, of course they'll look at me like, what? What are you talking about? And I'm
Mm,
like, you'll get it. You'll get it. But I was like, I don't even know sometimes,
mm,
or I'm a lot better at like apologizing to them or being like, I messed up here and like this wasn't, I shouldn't have said that or I shouldn't have done that. And that's what it is. I mean, you're constantly trying to that's like another having kids is almost like another healing path. Like,
mm,
before again, this is like the before and after. Like there was before kids where you're just like living life and, maybe you're trying to work on some of yourself, but like once you have kids, then it's like they just unlocked a whole nother layer that you didn't even know existed. And now you're definitely going into the depth, even if you didn't want to, like you're there. They're
mm.
forcing you to.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I'll see if that comes out, if that becomes part of my life at some point, because I'm definitely curious and it sounds amazing. And what a beautiful way to like build a rapport with your kids to be like not position yourself as some sort of like all-knowing dictator. You know what I mean? But to be like, you know what? I should have said what a great thing to impart with your kids. First of all, to know that they can communicate with you like really as themselves. And that also that it's okay to assess, right? That it's not just like, here's what I said, so that's what it is. It's like, well, let me assess for a moment. Like, what's the optimal way to connect here? What's the optimal way to like move forward in this or that situation? And that it's okay, and that it's okay to assess, and it's okay, and especially that it's important to have open communication like that. Like, just what a beautiful thing to impart to kids. So that sounds amazing. Cool.
Try. I mean,
Yeah. And then the very last thing, just a note to point out, was around corporate, that you came from this corporate world and that, something that I know, I'll just speak for myself that I love so much. I love when I get invited into corporate environments to guide mindfulness practice, because again, it's coming from this place of rooting it in practicality and pragmatism. And it's like if a person is so strung out in their work environment, they go home, it's going to be a lot harder to be present with their kids, with their family. It's going to be a lot harder to do everything we were just talking about, to just be more open-hearted, communicated, because, the work environment could put so much pressure on people. I see it all the time with my clients. And so I love when I get invited into these corporate spaces to support that and say, hey, this isn't woo-woo. This isn't just like something that's sort of like, oh, is this mandatory? What the hell? I should be getting back to emails. It's like when people access breathwork, meditation, Reiki, these different modalities, and then they see the shift in perspective and the value of like, oh, this is reconnecting me to my own self-awareness, like my own humanity, my own heart-centered wisdom, as I like to think of it and call it sometimes. Um, just to do that in those environments is so deeply meaningful. So it's awesome that you're coming from that space and that you support these corporate environments. And that was something that I felt immediately like resonated when we had started talking, was supporting environments like that. Because again, when you can soften the edges around the experience of your work environment, some people are very, very stressful. You can be more present, not just in your work and not just for yourself, which would make you more productive in your work, ironically, right? Creating the space can make you more productive. But then also when you go home, switching gears, you can be that much more grounded, whether it's with your family or friends or just your own free time and mental health space. So anyways, it's amazing that you do that work as well.
I was going to say, like, what's interesting about um, being in corporate, and again, this kind of goes back to my experience, but oftentimes you get, as an employee, you get so many just benefits and offers, and you have an on-site gym oftentimes, or you get some type of a reimbursement for fitness classes, or maybe it's meditation or whatever it is, right? Now, here's the thing. Oftentimes employees just don't use them, right? They don't use the benefits. I think there's a level of guilt there because I felt it before where it's like, if I'm not at my desk, if I'm not answering emails, if my light is not green, like, what are they going to think? Am I working? Like, maybe I'm taking a break, but I mean, we all deserve the break, right? So many. And here is the difference. So, like, I worked for a company who was based out of Germany, and you knew when Germans or like the Europeans or people from other countries were visiting because they were all taking their lunch breaks. And they would sit down, they wouldn't have their laptop, they would have one-on-one conversations with whoever they were there visiting. I was so often guilty of bringing my lunch back up to my desk. And I sort of did it for a couple of reasons. One was like, well, I wanted to get a workout in. So I was like, I'm going to go to the gym and then I'm going to eat at my desk, right? And I would talk myself into that. But, it's sort of an example of, oftentimes you get all these benefits, but you just don't use them out of this like guilt story, I think. So when you're doing these events, I think if there are leaders or managers that can, again, kind of going back to that group mindset, can offer it as like a group event, that's so impactful because then everyone feels like we're all in on this. Like,
Yep.
everyone's doing it. It's
Yep.
not, oh, meditations are available on Wednesday from 10 to 11. That's a little bit less likely for someone to join, right? Because easily a meeting pops up, easily there's other work, there's an email, there's a fire, there's something else that has to happen. But if collectively the entire team decides we are doing this, it's a part of our whatever health and wellness initiative for our team, everyone will show up. Even if there's like some people that are like, I don't really believe in this, but we're all doing it. So I think if there were more opportunities like that, I would sort of encourage that for people that are listening. If you are in a position where you could bring something like this in for your team, that's so impactful versus just like having it as an offering where people can do it by choice. Um, yeah.
1,000%. And the irony of this whole thing is it makes you better at your job.
Yeah.
Right? That's the irony. And it's like, it's the hardest thing to impart because it's like, well, taking a break, I don't have time to take a break. It's like, if you took this break, and it's not just like a random break where you're scrolling your phone, it's not that kind of break. It's an intentional break with a mindfulness activity of some kind. You will then be better at your job when you take that break. And there's actually scientific research to support this. There was one particular book I read that was all about like 1 minute of mindfulness equates to 9 minutes of focused productivity. So I'm not sure how they held the study to figure that out. But in essence, but it makes perfect sense to me. Like it just like it clears the muddy water in your head so that you could just see something like in an instant, like something that's cloudy or like an idea just like can come to you like a clear idea could come to you in an instant when you clear the muddy water by letting it settle, for instance. You just use like a metaphor, right? And so it's the irony that taking that break, especially as a collective, as a team collective, it boosts productivity, it boosts creativity, it boosts cooperation, right? And when you regulate together, you just like again communicate more from the heart than from like the whatever armoring you might be carrying or just the frenetic, stressful energy. So I love how you just laid that all out, and it makes such perfect sense and ties to that idea of the group power is not just stronger than willpower, but when you do it in a group, when it's like, oh, this is what the group is doing, you all just settle into it and it becomes that much more effective. Yeah, so that's beautiful. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to kind of share or speak to, like your website or social media handles or anything else you'd like to share while we're here?
Yeah. Well, maybe before we get into that, I wanted to mention just one quick book. So it's by Emily Fletcher. It's called Stress Less, Do More. I don't know if you've like read it, but it's a book that's very similarly about like the importance of mindfulness and taking those breaks and doing that meditation. And it's specifically for those busy professionals that are kind of on that, like on the either on the fence or maybe like completely don't believe in like the importance of meditation because they've struggled with it, right? And I think it's a hard practice to go into if you're just starting out, right? If you've never done it before. So I just wanted to mention that book because I really enjoyed it.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think if people are interested in learning more about me or working with me, my website is nunatherapy.com and my handles are, Nuna Therapy. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook and um, YouTube, most of the platforms that are out there nowadays.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, so I'll put all that stuff in the show notes, the different links, the couple of books we mentioned and everything. And that's it. Like even just and oh, I'm also going to link our podcast that we did about the breath. I'll link that in the show notes as well because I just love that. And so keep doing what you're doing. Your podcast is amazing. And the work that you do is incredible. And I'm just so glad we're connected. And yeah, beautiful, beautiful work going out into the universe. So thank you again. Thanks for listening to Mindfulness Unscripted. For in-person events, Zoom sessions, and more, visit jonorsini.com. Victory to the light within.